Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a little different than my normal content. Usually I'm sharing projects about EV builds, adventures, things here in the Pacific Northwest, travel, whatever. Today I'm going to be talking about some ecological issues that are going on in my own backyard. If you've seen some of my recent videos on the boat, you know that I have had to pull it out of the lake. And that is because the lake water levels here on Lake Sawyer have been dropping. And they've been dropping over the last decade. At the end of most summers, the lake levels are close to 4 feet lower than their normal levels. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means for the community here in Black Diamond. So part of the reason that I'm making this video is to raise awareness of this issue of the water dropping. And as you're watching the video, if you find this compelling or you want to help raise some visibility to this issue also, please comment on the video. It'll really help YouTube decide to show this to more people. And the more people that see this, the more awareness will raise to this possible issue, and the more likely we are to get more support from the community or even from our local governments to help. So please like and comment on this video. It'll help us get a little bit more visibility into this issue. So let's start this off by talking about Black Diamond itself. It's a relatively small community here in Western Washington with a relatively rich history. It was founded initially as a company coal mining town in the late 1800s, but over the last 100 years, coal mining has been phased out and the town has evolved into this great mixture of rural and suburban living that's close to nature still. It's surrounded by forests and you get these amazing views of Mount Rainier. There's great biking. There's these amazing complex of mountain bike trails and hiking trails, Summit Ridge and the Black Diamond Open Space, which are all these mountain bike trails that wind through the sort of south and east of where Lake Sawyer is at. I've spent a lot of time out there over the last couple of years riding my bikes, regularly see people out there walking or walking their dogs or other bikers. And then right at the center of all of it here is Lake Sawyer. Lake Sawyer is just kind of like on one side, it's got forest, but there's also houses around the lake. It's about a 280 acre lake, so it's pretty good size. It's the 4th largest natural lake in King County. And it gets a lot of use from the community. People are out here boating, kayaking, paddleboarding. There's fishing year round. I had a friend reach out to me earlier this year to let me know he was down here kayaking. He'd driven all the way down from Redmond just to go kayaking on this lake. And like I said, fishing's huge. From the docks, from boats, they stock the lake. So there's trout, there's bass, there's perch. I've heard there's catfish. It's a great place for people to recreate at. It's just amazing. And also with those fish come other wildlife. So it's great to both, I see and hear eagles around the lake all the time. During the summer, this summer, I could hear eagles chirping almost on a daily basis. Almost every morning I could hear eagles and would see eagles diving into the lake at various times to catch fish. So it's a great place and it's an amazing community and I feel very fortunate to be here. Like I said earlier, we've noticed something's changed, particularly at the end of the summer. The water levels are significantly lower. And we're going to dig into what's going on there and how much the lake levels are changing year over year and what we think is causing it and what, some actions are that we can take to mitigate it. We moved into this house in 2018, and by the end of that first summer, the water in the canal where our house is located was really low enough that we ended up, actually my boat ended up getting stuck in the mud that year. I figured that was a one-off, like, hey, maybe this was an exceptionally dry year and this is a one-off situation. But over the coming years, it became clear that that wasn't the case. And, the lake levels towards the end of the summer were dropping by quite a bit, several feet. It's actually one of the reasons, if you look at some of my other videos, why I bought a jet boat, because I was like, ooh, if I can run the jet boat in shallower water I'll get a little bit more time where I can enjoy my boat on the lake each year. But there was some other things that were odd. Some of the lake residents that I knew that had lived here for years said that that was uncommon and that it didn't happen in years past. And looking at, one of the residents on the lake has a weather station where they track all of the weather, but they also track the lake level, and they have a chart that includes the lake level history. It's on lakesawyerweather.com. There was a very distinct change in 2015. Prior to 2015, the lake levels remain within 8 to 10 inches of sort of the lake level max. And so they just weren't dropping as much. But in 2015, there was this massive drop of multiple feet in the lake levels, and it dropped almost 40 inches, which is about what it's done again this year. But this didn't make sense. It didn't make sense that the lake levels would be consistently about the same level year over year prior to 2015. And then after 2015, have these much wider swings. Things like climate change could obviously be an effect, but things like climate change don't typically have that radical of a change in such a short time frame, of a clear pattern happening for multiple years and then a very clear switch. And so you can just see that change in the graph of the lake level histories. This year was different though. This year, the lake levels not only dropped more than they had in previous years, they dropped faster. And more people were, my neighbors were talking about how they, were pulling their boat out in August to avoid the potential of having it stuck. If the water gets too low, your boat can't run through that water, and you don't want to risk having your boat stuck in the mud like I did years ago. It's a little unsettling. I pulled my boat out earlier this year. If I hadn't, the lake levels as they are now, I would absolutely be stuck. It would have been stuck in probably early September. So a couple of weeks before that, in mid-August, I ended up pulling the boat out. But it's not just the low areas of the lake. The canal is low. There's an area on the northern end of the lake that's referred to as the boot due to its shape. That is a lot of shallow water. But around the lake, there are a lot of docks that are completely out of the water, boats that are on boat lifts where if they put the boat lift down, the boat would not touch water, just because of how far water has receded this year, how low the lake levels have changed. Another thing that was a little unprecedented this year, City of Black Diamond put up warning signs around the boat launch itself. The boat launch has a bit of a drop off at the end of the boat launch. The boat launch is made out of sort of a concrete pad where cars back there, or trucks, back their boat on the boat trailer up. But there's a drop off that normally, with normal lake levels, a trailer wouldn't back off that far. You would never back your boat that far down, otherwise your car would be in the water. But as it is now, there's a risk of trailers basically backing off of the end of that ramp, and that could damage the boat that's on the trailer. It could damage the trailer itself. It could be a actual hazard of people, being stuck in the water, or there's all sorts of things that could happen there. So that's something that is new for this year as well, that we hadn't seen before. As I was planning for this, I did a little time walking around the lake and checking out various things. This lead is fed by two inlets. So there is, at the southern end of the lake, there are two creeks that drain into the lake. There's Rock Creek, which is fed through a sort of a wetlands that is called Frog Lake, which is a smaller lake. It's very shallow. It's mostly just wetlands. And then there's also Ravensdale Creek, which is, honestly, the two creeks come together both into the lake. They're separated by a few hundred feet. They're very close together. And then the lake drains out on the west side of the lake from Covington Creek. And there's a weir at the end of the canal, and this weir sort of is there to help maintain lake levels. There was a big deal sometime in like the 1940s or 1950s, and some lawsuits, and the weir is a permanent structure on this lake to sort of help maintain lake levels, unrelated to anything that we're going to be talking about here today. I walked around and I looked at the water coming into the lake and the water going out of the lake. And there's really no water coming in from Rock Creek at this point. So this has been a fairly dry summer, and there's not any water that's really feeding from Rock Creek. And if I go a little bit further upstream on Rock Creek, there's a place where it crosses one of the local roads, and there's water in the stream bed, but that water's not really moving. So I don't think there's really any water flow coming in from Rock Creek. On Ravensdale Creek, it's a little bit different story though. There is a pretty good flow of water coming into the lake from Ravensdale Creek. And if I go upstream, again, at another stream crossing, there's a bike trail that you can check out. Water's flowing very well further upstream on Ravensdale Creek too. So there's actually a pretty good inflow of water to the lake that is currently happening even at the end of this dry summer. I would guesstimate that it's somewhere in the 10 to 20 gallons a minute of water. So it's not insignificant. It's a bit of water spread over the 280 acres of the lake. That's not a massive amount of water, but it is a amount of water that is continually inflowing. And if you look at one of the other things I just want to call out real quick when we're talking about Ravensdale Creek, the area where I looked at the creek, they actually had done a bit of salmon restoration a few years ago. So I believe the Department of Ecology, along with a local foundation, spent a lot of funding building a bunch of riffraff that you can see in the video here along the creek to sort of help restore some of the salmon habitat there. However, on the outlet of the creek, on the Covington Creek side of the lake, there is no water that is flowing. There is no water that is even making it to the weir, let alone over the weir. And the culverts that run from the lake into Covington Creek are completely dry. You can basically walk across it. It is a completely dried lake bed at this point. And this is a time of year when salmon would normally be running up the streams. To get to the streams further upstream on Ravensdale Creek, for spawning purposes, and there's literally no way that salmon are making it through those culverts that are completely dry, let alone up the dry creek bed over the weir. It's not going to happen. In fact, it's hard to say when enough rain will happen and enough water will come into the lake to fill it up enough that it will fill things back up there. But it's interesting that there's water coming into the lake, but there's no water leaving the lake. So the question is, where is the water going? First of all, why is the water draining? And there's a couple of, maybe it's just evaporation, maybe it's leaking into the water table. Those are all possible, but let's explore a little bit more on to a possible cause. As I said before, it didn't make sense that the lake levels started dropping precipitously starting in 2015. And I really didn't have any idea of what could be causing that until earlier this year, when myself, as well as many other residents on the lake, received a letter from the Covington Water District that was sent out in July of this year. The letter indicated that some lake residents had been in contact with the Covington Water District about concerns of the water district's wells on 222nd Street. And these wells are located just a few hundred feet from the lake, and they do draw groundwater from an aquifer in the area that it is used to provide drinking water and all sorts of water for utility purposes. Covington Water District is the main water utility in this area, and they have sort of the responsibility of providing residences and businesses with water. And as a part of that, they have this set of wells near 222nd Street that are drawing a significant amount of water from the underground aquifer near the lake. The Covington Water District, however, in their letter, flatly denied that there was any connection between their groundwater pumping operations that were happening and the changes in lake water levels. They said there was no scientific evidence of correlation between pumping from the 222nd Street well field and Lake Sawyer's water levels. They even suggested, hey, there might be other causes like lakefront owner is illegally drawing water from the lake to irrigate their lawns. A little while after I got that initial letter, I got an email from the Lake Sawyer Advocacy group. This letter provided a little bit of a different perspective. The Lake Sawyer Advocacy group is a group of local residents who had been investigating this for the last couple of years and are the ones who had reached out to the Covington Water District on, what was going on and what their suspicions of what was happening. During a meeting, I believe this year, with the Covington Water District and the Lake Sawyer Advocacy Group, the Covington Water District had brought in their hydrologist who had studied some historical reports of the area, and he completely dismissed any connectivity between the lake and the aquifer that Lake Sawyer, or that the Covington Water District is drawing their well water from. Even though some of his own sources indicated that there is a possible connection. One of the other points that the Lake Sawyer Advocacy Group raised was that the Department of Ecology, who granted the initial permits for Covington Water District, ran their studies in the winter and spring. And so when those wells were tested and evaluated on how their draw would affect groundwater and possibly the surrounding lake levels, it was in the spring and the winter, which, if you're from Western Washington, here is very wet, and there's enough rainfall to recharge the local aquifers and lakes, almost regardless of how much water is being drawn from them. One of the other things that Covington Water District notes is that they have started pulling more water from other sources than the 222nd well had during the recent years. And that's a little misleading, though. So their other source happens to be the Green River, which is nearby, and they contract with the city of Tacoma to get that water. However, they're showing the water that is pulled on an annual basis. They're not showing the month-over-month times when they're using the 222nd well in that report. I don't know, but I strongly suspect that if we showed the report for the amount of water that is drawn from the 222nd well on a month-over-month basis, you would see that it is pulling quite a bit more water during the summer months than during the rest of the year. And the reason for that is that the Covington Water District opened an agreement with a nearby water district, the Lake Meridian Water District, to provide them emergency water, and that started in 2015. So there's a strong correlation there with when the Covington Water District started providing the other nearby water district with emergency water supply in the summer, happening to be exactly in 2015, at the same time as we saw the first precipitous drop of water in the lake levels. I think the other thing that the Lake Sawyer Advocacy Group uncovered was an event that happened last year. And this chart here kind of shows what happened in this event. There were 2 times when Covington Water District had to shut down their wells due to maintenance. And during both of those periods of time, the lake water stops dropping. And there's a very clear correlation here of the pumps being stopped for maintenance and the water in the lake no longer dropping. And so, I think it's hard to ignore this bit of evidence as a clear indication that the water that's being pumped from the wells is directly affecting Lake Sawyer's water levels. So I want to talk a little bit about the original reports that were written for this area and the hydrology of the area and where the Lake Sawyer or where the Covington Water District is pulling their water from, and why I don't believe that the two are completely disconnected. So let's talk about that a little bit. All right, to describe this a little bit better, we're going to go to the whiteboard, and my whiteboard's out here in the garage, so we're in the garage to talk about this. This diagram, this is sort of my cross section of the lake and the local hydrology. And this is based on 2 reports. And these reports are both referenced by the Covington Water District as well as by the Lake Sawyer Advocacy Group. There's 2 reports. One was done in 1990 by Hart Krauser, and then the other is 1995 by the USGS. The USGS one was focused on groundwater in King County, and the Hart-Krauser one was really looking at the geology of the Lake Sawyer area. So what I'm showing here, this is all of the geology around here is glacial outwash or glacial till. Glacial till is a very compact, almost cement-like material. It's very hard. It's very hard to dig through. It's sand, gravel, silt, all mixed together. But there's some other layers. So this layer that I've got here that I show with these circles is a very permeable gravel layer. And so that's something where you can get a lot of water through quite quickly. Water will drain through it pretty freely. And everything else on this diagram is glacial till with the lake represented here. And then right here, this is what I'm representing as the Covington Water District wellhead. And right down here are the slots, and you can see the well, it has some slots about 60 feet down that is right at the band where you would have this aquifer here. So this all makes sense, and this is sort of the story. What I've drawn here is sort of the story that is represented in those reports, as well as the Covington Water District hydrologist pushed for and said, hey, the lake here cannot be feeding into this aquifer because there's a section of till here. Now, there's a couple of things that I have some issues with of making a definitive statement saying that this well cannot be drawing water down from the lake. First of all, you can see I've got a little bit of a slope here that's showing this band here. The wellhead, the depth of the well here, where it's drawing water from, is the same depth as the bottom of the lake. So it's about 65 feet. That's a little hard to say, hey, with these only being a couple hundred feet away, does this zone here of gravel aquifer, does it really drop consistently across the entire breadth of the lake? Or could some places it have been more horizontal and it actually intersects with the lake bed? I think given the fact that what we're seeing with water draining, with the water levels dropping along with the pumping, I think it makes sense that these are most likely connected. Also, in both of the reports, both of the Hart-Krauser report and the USGS report, it does indicate that it is possible that some of this glacial till layer here has been weathered away and that it's missing. They've actually identified a couple of places, not immediately in the Lake Sawyer area, but other places on the Covington Plain where this is completely missing. So I think there's a high likelihood that this is not continually contiguous across the lake and into this aquifer. The other thing to take note, there's only, even in their drawings, there's only about 10 feet between the bottom of the lake and where they're proposing that this aquifer would be. Now, while I said that glacial till is hard and it's concrete-like, it's not completely impermeable. This is not it's not like somebody laid down a membrane and said, oh, no water is going to pass through here at all. There's going to be cracks and crevices in here, and there's going to be some vertical migration of water from one zone to the other. And it even says that in both of the reports, that there could be some vertical migration between these. So it seems really unlikely that there's not some bridges of the water between here. The other thing I want to call out, Covington Water District is pulling out 1.8 million gallons of water per day from this wellhead. It's actually a series of wells, it's 5 wells, but they're pulling out 1.8 million gallons of water in the summer from these wells right here. And this aquifer is only 10 feet thick. So if you think about the volume of water that they're pulling from here, the ability for this relatively small 10-foot thick aquifer to recharge completely, it just seems incredibly unlikely that they'd be able to maintain that. Especially when you think about, this aquifer, yes, water can drain through it relatively quickly, but it's still mostly rock. It's still, the majority of the volume in that aquifer is mostly rock. So the water has got to be coming from somewhere. And that somewhere is most likely Lake Sawyer. There's one other thing I'd like to address directly from Covington Water District's letter that they sent in July. They indicated that they performed carbon dating on the water from their wells and then again from Covington Creek to discern whether or not if they're connected. So yes, you can carbon date water. Radiocarbon dating provides you a time frame of how long it has been since the water that you're testing has been in equilibrium with the atmosphere or when it's directly exposed to the atmosphere. And their findings were that the water from their wells was showing up as being 400 years old, and that the water in Covington Creek was 40 years old. Now, I think you have to take those numbers themselves with some heavy skepticism. Because let's go back and we think about that aquifer being only 10 feet thick, it's going to have to recharge from water from somewhere. This is not an ancient water source that they've been pumping out tens or hundreds of millions of gallons of water per year from for 20 to 30 years and expect that we're still pulling out 400-year-old water. That's incredibly unlikely. What is much, much more likely is that the water is picking up carbonate from the glacial material that is being drawn from, and that is getting mixed in and throwing off the measurements. So that carbonate in the gravel is likely thousands of years old and is skewing their measurements off and making water that is probably a couple years old at most look like it's 400 years old. Similarly, the water in Covington Creek, it's not 40 years old. It should be exposed to the air, and it seems suspect that is also showing as 40 years old. It shouldn't be. It's basically new water. It's water that has been either in the lake or has been exposed directly to the air in the creek bed, and so something is throwing those numbers off also. And so the fact that they're putting out these numbers as proof that their well and Lake Sawyer are completely separate is again should be taken with some skepticism. So what can we do, or what are our options here? I think the Lake Sawyer Advocacy Group has done an amazing job pulling together the data and putting together a great story around what's likely happening here. I'm not actually affiliated with them. I did reach out to them before I started this video to make sure that I could use this data and share the information that they've gathered. And so, I think please check out their site. Look at what they're doing. I'll include links in the description to everything here. The other thing is there's a couple of candidates who are running for board positions on the Covington Water District. Both of these guys all have expressed support for Lake Sawyer and coming up with a solution for what's going on here. If you're in the community and you're a registered voter, please consider voting for Kevin Broom and Pete Hackett for Covington Water District. They're both, again, advocating for having Covington Water District look into this further and doing something to come up with a solution. And I want to be clear. I want to be clear that Covington Water District is in a bit of a hard spot here. They have a responsibility to provide water as a resource, as a utility company, and they do have the water rights to pull the water from the aquifer. However, as a utility company managing a limited resource, they also have a responsibility to act as a conservation group and provide some amount of oversight onto how much their draw of this resource is potentially affecting the environment and what the ecological impacts of the draw on the water is. So I'd really like Covington Water District to look at this and really consider it as a real potential problem that is causing, not only potentially ecological harm when you consider what could be happening with the salmon habitat and the wildlife around the area, but also, what the impact is to the community. Lake Sawyer is an amazing resource. And I think we're fortunate to have it. And it's one of those things that I think the community here would suffer a loss, is suffering a loss given the way that it's being managed at this point. So I'd really like to see Covington Water District step up. There should be, a lot of what I've put in here is a lot of assumptions, and there's some guesswork going on, which is typical in geology. Geology is not an exact science. There's an amount of guesswork that goes on in geology. But somebody needs to go through and do a updated hydrological report and really spend the time to do the science to understand what is happening here. I think what I'm proposing is that and what I think the community is looking at here now that we see the data, is that these wells are causing this impact. But, without a really good hydrologic study, I don't think anybody can say that that is for sure the case. Similarly, I don't think without that study, we can say that it is not the case.